Hello, good evening and warm welcome to another edition of Business Live. Coming up in this bulletin, Fitch warns of more rating downgrades of African banks as it says Ghana's debt exchange program will affect domestic and regional banks. U.S. government hints of plans to lobby International Monetary Fund Board to approve Ghana's request for fund program.
The current economic crisis requires IMF assistance. I think that's why those international financial institutions were created. So we've urged the government of Ghana to negotiate with the IMF with urgency, and then as a board member, we'll support those programs.
Also in this bulletin, government records 73% oversubscription of Treasury bill sale as investor interest in the short-term market continue to rise sharply, whilst interest rates fall following debt exchange program announcement. We have details of these and many others lined up for you. Please stay. Grateful you could stay on, and those were your commodities updates. I am Pious Kojo Backah. Let's now zoom into our very first story. And the U.S. government has indicated that it will carry out the needed behind-the-scenes engagement to ensure that Ghana's request for an IMF program is approved. Government is currently negotiating with the fund to close a staff agreement by this week. Now, this will enable executive board of the IMF to approve Ghana's deal in the first quarter of next year. The U.S. government is one of the largest shareholders and has 16.77% voting right on the board of the IMF. Well, the U.S. ambassador to Ghana, Virginia Palmer, has been speaking to Joy News.
The current economic crisis requires IMF assistance. I think that's why those international financial institutions were created. So we've urged the government of Ghana to negotiate with the IMF with urgency, and then as a board member, we'll support those programs. And further to that, we work with Ghanaian business and the Ghanaian government to strengthen the business environment so that Ghana lives up to its international reputation. It's important that problems with contract sanctity, problems with local hiring, problems with corruption don't undermine that, if I'm honest. And I think friends speak honestly to friends. For the $138 million trying to on point.
I'm interested in that as well.
I was very pleased to be able to announce those additional funding. A lot of that work will focus on agriculture and stimulating support for your agriculture sector, because that, again, is an engine for economic growth. And we do, again, techniques that improve farming for farmers, but we also work with financial institutions, for example, to try to leverage finance for small and medium enterprises in the agriculture and agro-processing sectors. So one of our programs, we think, will unleash something like $270 million of investment in that very important sector. We also work in clean energy. We work to improve Ghana's fishing sector, which has been under threat, I think, and programs like that.
Let's stay well on this development, and joining me via Zoom to further discuss this issue is political risk analyst Dr. Pious Kojo Backah to help us appreciate the developments in relation to this. Dr. Pious Kojo Backah, grateful you could join us on Business Live. I'm pretty sure you've been monitoring what the U.S. ambassador has been saying. What do you make of the U.S. stance of Ghana's request for an IMF program, first off?
I think it's actually quite a positive development in the sense that it's a good thing, largely because the U.S. has a lot of influence and say in how the IMF is run. If I'm not mistaken, it is the single largest contributor to the IMF and also kind of has the largest voting bloc, although all members, all countries in the world our members. So you can actually see that given that outsized role that the U.S. has, and the understanding of the urgency of Ghana's request to actually get an IMF board approval after a staff level agreement has been passed, it all comes as really quite positive, and it indicates that we are likely to get that staff level agreement, and then contingent on that, the US would push for us to quickly get the approval. Because of the nature of the crisis we're dealing with, really requires us to get that IMF program going as soon as possible.
Great. So do you connect this with a recent comment by the managing director of the IMF, where she said she would ensure that Ghana gets the needed support? Will you?
I think that's all within that same ballpark. That comment was when the president met the IMF boss a couple of months ago. And then at the time, a number of us indicated that a staff level agreement was more likely towards the end of the year or early next year. So we are talking about similar timelines. But the fact that the IMF boss has indicated that she would push, but also now the biggest voting member and contributor of the fund, the US, also says that they will do their bit to get us over the line. That is very positive and quite an important development.
Dr. Theo Champon, looking at all the developments, seeing how things are moving quickly, could this question the credibility for the IMF program for Ghana?
Could you please come again? I'm not sure.
I'm asking that, looking at all the developments, we are seeing how fast they are moving, could this question the credibility of the IMF program for Ghana?
No, I don't think that would. I think really most of the program areas have largely been agreed on. We saw bits of that already reflected in the 2023 budget. It's the details that are still being worked on. And also the idea or the fact that government had to undertake on the debt restructuring exercise as one of the preconditions for the IMF program financing. So I think these are all significant but positive steps, and it does actually show that we are quite closer to getting that staff level agreement, and then eventually closer to getting the board approval.
Is it right to read some geopolitical into this?
Geopolitics is always at play, and if the US is the biggest contributor and voting bloc in the fund, then of course we cannot, discount the role of geopolitics and of course the US interest in all of this. But at the end of the day, this is a crisis that is Ghana's crisis to solve, and we are a member of the IMF and other, international bodies, and they are there precisely to help us in times like this.
Before you go, we are learning that a staff level agreement has been reached. What are your preliminary thoughts on that?
I think last week we were already it was in the grapevine that something could be reached by Tuesday. So if that is the case, then of course that is a big milestone, and kudos to the people who led the discussions and the deliberations. The important thing really now is, the details of that staff level agreement and the extent to which, if any, the austerity measures being proposed in that, program would affect Ghanaians, because that's really where we are now. So we're looking forward to seeing those details being announced maybe tomorrow or the day thereafter.
What signal should this send to investors?
I think it's a positive signal. Everybody's been waiting for this for several months now. So this is quite an important and significant step. And it really would then mean that going forward, somebody's holding our hand to ensure that we have the policy credibility that we're looking for. And that ultimately bodes well for the economy and some of the indicators that we track, like the exchange rate and depreciation or inflation, and all those variables that really matter for the ordinary Ghanaian.
Grateful for your input this evening, Dr. Theo Champon. He is a political risk analyst helping us appreciate developments in relation to the ongoing IMF negotiation. A while longer on the economy this time around, and the international ratings agency Fitch is warning of more rating downgrades of African banks in 2023, with Ghana's debt restructuring expected to affect both domestic and regional banks. According to its 2023 Outlook report, sovereign debt distress is the major risk to African banks' financial profile. Here is a report.
Fitch said it is concerned about the potential sovereign default, with many African governments facing very high and increasing debt servicing burdens, worsened by rising interest rates, US dollar strength, and unfavorable external funding conditions. It pointed out that the country's debt restructuring program will affect both domestic as well as regional banks. It explained that African banks' credit drivers will be determined by both global and domestic shocks in 2023. The rating agency added that operating environment will be affected by a combination of high inflation, rising rates, currency depreciation, and hard currency shortages, but moderate growth rate, with no major African economy entering a recession. It further said banks' sovereign debt risk have increased, with some African governments struggling with debt servicing burdens and unfavorable external funding conditions. It continued that banks will, however, remain profitable, benefiting from rising interest rates and still satisfactory loan growth, which will mitigate a moderate rise in credit costs.
All right, so on the back of this, we have banking consultant Nana Otue Champon to help us better appreciate the issue. Grateful, Nana Otue Champon, you could join us. Are the recent reforms by the Bank of Ghana enough to mitigate shocks against the banks? If not, what additional measures should we be looking at? Kindly unmute for me, Doc.
Yeah, this is an ongoing regulatory domain that they are looking at. What they have thought out for now will suffice, but they are monitoring on a minute-by-minute basis, not even on a day-by-day. So from that angle, it is fine. But firstly, let's go back to the Fitch report and the conclusion that they drew, which is very encouraging. They said that we should expect moderate GDP growth, gross domestic product. And with no African economy entering a recession, which is positive. Then they are also saying that combined with the bank's relatively good fundamentals, and we know that Ghana, for instance, the banks have got very, very strong fundamentals because of the capital buffers that they have. Then we also anticipate that there will be a prevention of a significant more negative scenario. So therefore, on that basis, I think it's a good start. Now, when it comes to the Financial Stability Council, which is made up of the 4 regulators for the financial system, i.e. the Bank of Ghana, the Insurance Commission, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the NPRA, that is the
National Pensions Regulatory Authority.
Now, therefore, they have also come out to issue a statement which supports what Bank of Ghana on their own are saying, because when they put them together, the banks form a bigger chunk. And so Bank of Ghana is part of this council, and the council statement is also very encouraging that they are not abandoning any financial institution within the system. Although it's voluntary, they are encouraging the institutions to participate. And once you participate, then they will ensure that any problem that you get into, they will help to solve. For instance, they are setting up a stability fund where with a seed money of 1 billion, where if you have a liquidity problem, then as a last resort, they will assist you. So I think generally, they are on the positive side that once, as you have just mentioned, that a staff level agreement has been reached with the IMF, we hope that sooner than later, early in the new year, we will get the board approval and then hit presto.
Interesting. So if what you're telling me is anything to go by, banks operating in Ghana, I can clearly say are safe from debt restructuring. Am I correct?
Oh, yes, they are safe. Be challenged, but they are safe from the restructuring.
All right. So
how do you the back of a stability council? Yes.
Great. So how do you foresee the banking industry shaping up post the exchange program?
Once the exchange program, next year is going to be tough, especially since there's going to be zero interest payment for bonds. Then 2024, we only going to have 5%, and it will be from 2025 that we'll be receiving the 10%. So it will be challenged, but challenged within manageable levels. So I am on the positive side.
Grateful. Nana Otue Champon, we are really grateful for your time this evening on Business Live, for your input. Let's move away from that and touch on this story. Following the exemption of Treasury bills from the domestic debt exchange program, investor interest in the short-term securities continues to rise sharply. Now, this is coming after the government recorded about 73% oversubscription of T-bills. Charles Nixon Yeboah has more.
The government obtained a total of 3.15 billion cedis from the Treasury bills auction that took place on Friday, December 9th. Though a chunk of the transaction came from the 91-day T-bill, the 182-day bill also recorded some significant sale. This clearly shows that investor interest in the short-term securities is growing, but at the expense of government bonds, which has been affected by the domestic debt restructuring. Liquidity in that regard has witnessed immense improvement for the third week running. The bids tendered for the 91-day T-bills were estimated at 2.19 billion cedis. Meanwhile, interest rate fell for the first time since January this year, whilst the 91-day T-bill yield dropped by 0.54% to 35.58%. That of the 182-day bill also fell to 36.5% from 37.2% recorded a week ago.
More on T-bills, and head of trading at Republic Securities, Patrick Edem Agama, describes Treasury bills as a safe haven for investors considering the debt exchange program, hence the throng to the short-term securities.
The T-bill has become a safe haven for most investors in the market because of the debt exchange program. We can see very low interest in bonds and notes now because of this program. So this gives the government a great opportunity to be able to drive interest rate down. But I'll be quick to say this is a very slim window that's open for interest rate to drive down because of other factors that could push these rates up again.
Yeah, and all of this you're saying is because of the announcement of the debt exchange program?
Yes. Basically, the debt exchange program may declare that it will not be, the T-bills will not be affected. So investors have seen this as a safe haven, pushing money into T-bills instead of other instruments on the market. And this program is going to end on the 19th. The window for people to tender in their bonds will end on the 19th. So we expect the market to, the secondary market to recover and start trading other bonds depending on how favorable or unfavorable the exchange program goes. So this is a very short time for the T-bill to actually get this traction we are seeing now.
Welcome back. This is still Business Life with me, Pious Kojo Backah, and we continue with the rest of our stories. And the Bank of Ghana has rolled out fresh set of relief measures to support special deposit-taking institutions that will sign up for the debt exchange program. Well, this is similar to what has already been outlined for commercial banks that have also signed up for this initiative. George Yaffe has more.
Based on this letter sent to the specialized deposit-taking institutions, which includes savings and loans companies and microfinance institutions, the central bank maintained that it will reduce the cash reserves from 6% to 5%. The central bank also disclosed that it will reduce the capital adequacy ratio from 10 to 8%. The regulator also directed these institutions to submit their weekly data to the Bank of Ghana when it comes to the liquidity ratios to enable the Bank of Ghana to monitor their liquidity needs. On the up to 15 billion Ghana cedis stabilization fund that government is working to set up, the Bank of Ghana asked these institutions to submit their action plan in terms of how they want to access these funds in meeting their liquidity needs. What the Bank of Ghana has rolled out is similar to what it announced for commercial banks last week. Some key points to note here. Institutional investors in the commercial banks have up to December 19 to sign up to this debt exchange program. Now, based on the letters sent to the commercial banks and non-deposit-taking institutions, these regulatory measures that the Bank of Ghana has rolled out will take off from December 23, 2022. All these measures put out by the Bank of Ghana is to ensure that none of these financial institutions is impacted badly when this debt exchange program kicks off. But it will be interesting to see whether all these financial institutions will indeed sign up to this debt exchange program by December 19, 2022.
Well, financial analyst Christian Tichijan supports government's decision to roll out fresh set of relief measures to support special deposit-taking institutions that will sign up for the debt exchange program. According to him, this is vital to the economy's recovery.
Absolutely. When you look at government total debt, that is the domestic debt of about 15.5 billion. The commercial banks alone hold a chunk of it, which is about 5.1 billion. That is expressed in USD. And this represents about 33%. And it happens to be the biggest sector in terms of percentages of the debt owed to. So it's absolutely important that the government pays a critical attention to that sector. And we shouldn't forget that somewhere 2016, 2017, the government spent over 16 billion Ghana cedis, we understand, in cleaning up the banking sector. And since then, there's been a lot of success that's chalked. So whatever it is to be done by the Bank of Ghana, by the central bank and other stakeholders to actually ensure that the sanity of that sector is maintained has to be done. Against this backdrop is the central bank moving to address the potential impact of some of these debt restructuring proposals to ensure that the banks stay very liquid.
And that's it for Business Live for tonight. I am Pious Kojo Backah. For more news, log on to myjoyonline.com/business. Always a pleasure serving you. Do enjoy the rest of our programs.